All right. So, what we're going to talk about today is your day-to-day energy and why a lot of people think that the way to solve this energy problem that they have is to resort to stimulants such as like caffeine, and why this isn't the way that it has to be, which as typically, people just always resort to caffeine to, give them that boost of energy during the day. But how we can fix this problem, more or less getting to the root cause of things and what kind of causes this downstream cascade effect to happen in the first place, and how do we fix it? So, starting with stimulants. So the biggest problem is that people think, that if you take a stimulant like caffeine, it fixes the issue, right? But stimulants really only mask the signal that is being output. So energy products do one thing and one thing only. They block your body's fatigue signals and help mobilize fuel to help give you that little burst of energy. Now, this can feel good for a couple of hours, and even some effects a couple of days. But the root problem in it all is going to stay broken. So your body doesn't default toward maximal energy output. So like when your body produces ATP, it just doesn't produce it at the highest clip possible. Just like when you drive your car, your engine doesn't give you the maximum output possible. It would be redlining in a sense, right? It gives output based on the throttle control that you give it, and it's kind of the same way with your body, right? It only makes energy when conditions allow. Now, stimulants can override that system. If we're keeping on the car example, right? If you put nitrous in a car, right, that's going to give it more horsepower, more go, right? It overrides the normal system, but kind of coming back to the body side of things, like stimulants override the system, but they don't restore the problem that you have in the first place. So if we look at it in a very simplistic manner here, stimulants, they block fatigue. They're going to help mobilize fuel such as glucose from the liver to help give you that little boost of energy, right? It can speed your heart rate up, get you going as well too. And then again, you can feel good from a couple of hours to even a few days as far as like the lingering effects. Now, as far as what stimulants don't do, is they don't repair that ATP engine that is obviously broken along the chain. In some points, it does not restore the actual balance of the ATP production, and it doesn't fix other root problems. So there's no real change to fixing the issue. You're just masking the issue for a very short period of time. Now, if you're going through your day-to-day life and you're just fatigued all the time, you have to think of this in a manner as fatigued is permission that is going to be revoked from the energy ATP production standpoint. So, your body just doesn't make energy on demand. Again, it doesn't produce the maximum amount of energy. When it does make energy and when you need the energy, it can't just make it on command if the permissions are revoked. So, it makes energy when conditions are safe enough, right? So when if you're trying to make the energy and you don't have the substrates aren't accessible, they aren't usable, right? Your recovery signals are just flat out missing. You're sleeping 3 4 5 hours a night, right? Your recovery is in the dirt. Your day-to-day stress life is just too stressful. Obviously you're not going to be making a lot of ATP at that point, because you have to keep in mind that like your body does things to reduce harm to you, right? And so if you're always having just copious amounts of energy, right, the damage risk that you're going to have to your body just goes way up, right? So, in an essence, you being fatigued all the time, tired all the time, isn't it's not a thing that your body is broken. It's not failure, but it's protection from something that's not quite right, if that makes sense. So if we look at like what actual conditions are needed for that energy production, obviously you need adequate sleep and recovery as well too. These signals for the energy production, that sleep and recovery, they must be present for that to take place. Obviously having low stress, low inflammation all across the body, and then good insulin sensitivity as well too. Like cells need access to use, glucose for energy. If you don't have good insulin sensitivity, I mean, you physically can't access that to begin with. So you need all of these in order to actually be able to have energy production, which will, in turn, lower your fatigue on a day-to-day aspect. Now, the biggest question is like, how does energy actually work? Like, where does that energy come from? And energy works in a cascading form. So if you look at ATP production, it has six steps, one after another. And if any one of these steps fail, everything downstream is gonna take a hit, right? And then one important thing to keep in mind too, right, is if if the blockage is at step two, right, and you are trying to fix step five, well, the blockage starts up here, right? Everything else downstream is going to be messed up. So you have to identify which step in this ATP production is essentially messed up in order to fix it. So, just a basic way to say that, is you actually have to fix what's broken instead of trying to treat symptoms that are downhill, right? So, for example, if you're tired all the time, right, you have low energy throughout the day, you simply drinking a thing of caffeine, right, isn't necessarily going to fix your problem. It's not fixing what's actually broken. There's several things up the chain of command that's probably needs to be addressed first to get that fatigue to be pulled down and your body be allowed to make ATP again. So if we look at these steps, and we're not going to go like too far deep into detail on these, but number one is you have to have the substrate available. This is essentially just your macros, right? Do you have enough glucose, fats, amino acids available to use to make that energy? Number two is going to be, can you actually transport that to the cells? So you have to get these substrates into the mitochondria, duh, to give the actual mitochondria a chance to perform, right? And then it has to be converted into acetyl CoA, and you have to have enough cofactors to do this as well too. And again, we're not going too deep into this, but I just want to walk you through this. And then number two, this acetyl CoA, is going to be converted, and it has to be, available to be used inside of the Krebs cycle. And from there, it's going to be shifted into the electron transport chain. And then from there, ATP is going to be able to be made. So as you can see, right, like you got to have several steps available to actually make ATP. And then again, if any one of these above, steps are skipped, they're missed, they're not very efficient. Everything downstream is essentially going to take a hit. So, um, kind of circling back to the caffeine side of things, like if we look at like what most people reach for, right, to solve this fatigue issue temporarily instead of fixing the root cause, is they just create a dependency, right? Like you might know somebody who has to drink two, three, four, five energy drinks a day to stay awake, right? Granted, I drink one, maybe 2 to 3 days a week, like really on my hard days. And honestly, I think it's more or less for me just a placebo effect, maybe. I don't think I necessarily need them. I've gone weeks without them before, but I think it's more or less for the taste for me, to be honest. But a lot of people get a dependency on them, and they don't really try to fix the root cause at hand. So again, what do these things actually do? So are they going to block those fatigue signals so you don't feel tired? Essentially, caffeine blocks adenosine, to where like you just don't feel tired. That's what caffeine does, and that's why that you have to, make sure that you're not drinking caffeine 8 to 10 hours before that you plan to go to bed. Because if you drink it too close to bedtime, well, it's going to block those receptors. That's going to make you feel tired, right? So you don't actually feel tired, and you just can't go to sleep, right? Um, and then again, it's going to force mobilization. So caffeine is going to trigger adrenaline, which then pulls a glucose from the liver and fat from the tissues and puts it into the bloodstream, so it's available to be used just like that, right? So again, you're going to feel good, for a couple hours, and even some substrates up to 2 or 3 days later. But it's just a very temporary effect. What it doesn't do is it doesn't repair any of those like six steps. If there's any of those steps in that chain is broken, it's not going to repair that ATP engine. It's not going to restore, those cellular conditions. And this is kind of, one of the problems with a lot of these peptides that a lot of people are taking today, like the mitochondrial peptides, right? Um, if you're having issues, like with your mitochondria, and you're having these like steps in this chain that are broken, your body is protecting you from having that mitochondrial function available because something in the chain is broken, right? So follow me here. Now you're taking a peptide that is going to force that mitochondrial production to continue on, even though something in the chain behind it is broke, right? So that's one thing to where like a lot of people just totally get like off the wayside, when it comes to the peptides. Like there's obviously a chain, there's a step in the chain that's broken way beforehand, but you're not fixing it. It's, kind of going back to a car example. If you put gas in your car, right, in the tube that goes from the gas nozzle at the pump into your fuel tank, if that tube has a hole in it, right, and you're putting all this money into your motor because your motor is running like crap, right? Well, you're leaking, if that tube is broken going from your gas cap into your fuel tank, right? You're not getting fuel into the fuel tank, then your engine is being starved, hence running like crap, right? This is kind of like the example of if you take these, mitochondrial peptides, you put a new motor in the car because maybe the motor is just trash, right? I'm gonna restart, from the ground up, give it a new motor that should fix it. But you didn't fix the root cause, and you didn't fix the fuel line going from the gas cap to the fuel tank. So it's always going to be an issue until you fix that previous step, right? So I hope this is kind of making a little sense as far as like you can take all these stimulants to mask the effect, but if you don't fix the root issue, I mean, you're beating a dead horse essentially. So if you want to do this, so you need to fix the cascade. One of those steps, right? Like whatever that step is, it has to be fixed. So just in a very generalized, basic sense, obviously make sure that your sleep quality is good and your stress management is handled adequately. You're, obviously having, plenty of nutrients, micros, macros, and key minerals in your diet as well too. You're going to want to try to manage, inflammation, systemically all across the board, right? Make sure that your insulin sensitivity is good as well too, so your body actually has access to the glucose that your body is, trying to give to make ATP. And then obviously, support your mitochondrial health, which all of this kind of goes into, supporting that mitochondrial health. And so, at the end of the day, you have to keep, at the forefront of all of this, you have to stop treating the signal that you're getting because your body is going to restrict the energy and you're going to be fatigued as a byproduct of your body trying to protect you. So, again, if you're just constantly trying to override the system without fixing what's actually wrong, you could cause more damage downstream in the long run, right? So you have to make sure that you're optimized on all levels first. All six of those steps are where they need to be before just trying to start drinking 800 milligrams of caffeine to stay awake. So I know that was a little more maybe I don't want to say in depth, but maybe a little more um, mm, maybe a little more in depth. I don't know than normal. But anybody got any questions with any of that? I'll try my best to answer them. This could be a very deep topic, but try to keep it very surface as surface level as I could. I guess.